Hey everyone, TWA here. Today we will be building Tamiya's 1/48 scale Pacific Theater Buffalo. Construction began in the cockpit, and with the exception of those small ejector marks that you can see I've already puttied and sanded, this process was typical Tamiya flawlessness. The wings were similarly effortless in their assembly, and they fit perfectly with almost no putty and minimal sanding. Seat belts were added by laying two pieces of Tamiya tape on top of one another, then eyeballing a roughly appropriate thickness and cutting it with an X-Acto knife. The ends were then glued onto the chair with superglue and the belt manipulated into an interesting shape before being secured again with CA. Cockpit painting followed my typical process, an overall black base followed up with the general overpainting of 2 parts XF3 to 1 part XF2. I then added buff and yellow to this mix until I thought it looked right and selectively post-shaded. Once this had been allowed to dry overnight, I dry brushed the cockpit with a bit of the original color added to white. Details were picked out with relevant Vallejo colors. Black painted areas were then carefully dry brushed with a Vallejo light gray, and final details were picked out with the Vallejo red, silver, white, and yellow. After a coat of Tamiya gloss was allowed to dry, the cockpit was washed with Flory Model's clay-based wash. It was removed after a few hours with the aid of water. Chipping inside the cockpit was replicated with a silver Prismacolor pencil. The engine was painted by dry brushing silver onto a semi-gloss black surface. The engine was fixed to the fuselage with superglue. The canopy was masked using the masks included in the kit. I don't generally like these, but with the canopy frames as light as they were on this model, I would say that they are almost required. The canopy was then painted with the same mix used to paint the cockpit. The airframe was first based in black. On the left underside, NATO black was sprayed into the center of panels, and then that side was masked off, and the right side was marbled in white, then painted with XF21. The undersides were then masked and the upper surfaces marbled. They were then painted with Tamiya Dark Earth. As an aside, I believe that this is too dark for this color and that you should probably seek a different option. I know I will be looking more into mixing for future early British builds. One of my main purposes for this build was to have some time to practice freehanding camouflage in preparation for an upcoming project. This was done slowly with a highly thinned XF81 and very low pressure. Initially I tried to straight up freehand, but as painting went on I started sketching by adding fine points at inflection points and then connecting the dots. As an aside, I also think that the screen is a bit too dark. The model was then sprayed with Tamiya gloss, and after it set, the decals were applied in the typical fashion. I let them sit in hot water for about 40 seconds, apply microset to the surface of the model, apply the decal, apply solvaset, and I don't touch it for a few hours. I have heard that I may have been using my solvent wrong. I saw that it may work better if you let the decal dry completely first and then apply your solvent. I will report back when I've had a chance to try this alternate method. Once the decals were finished, I sealed the surface with another coat of gloss. The model was then washed with a Flory Models clay-based wash, which was then removed with the aid of water. Between the dark colors and the generally lacking recessed detail, this was less effective than I would typically like. The tires were painted with a Vallejo flat black, while a Tamiya matte coat dried on the model. The canopy and belly window were set into place using crystal clear. Mostly due to real-world time constraints, I kept weathering pretty minimal and simple on this one, and I think it largely came out okay. Pretty much all that was done was selectively chipping with a fine brush and Vallejo silver paint. Exhaust stains were once again, unfortunately, lazily, replicated with Tamiya makeup soot. The antenna was added with superglue and fine, easy line. The hole in the fuselage for it was drilled with a pin vise. torpedo tube was finished with a Molotov chrome pen, and the model was then complete. I thought that this was a perfectly pleasant kit with no major fit or construction errors. After building it, I don't particularly like the Pacific scheme, but I like the bones of this kit so much that I'm probably going to try to pick up another one to build as a finished machine. I'd advise caution on using the colors I did. The green looks too dark to me and the brown is also a bit off. I think the brown could simply be lightened, but the green is simply off, and I will be experimenting with mixing options before I do this scheme again. I also can't remember why I painted the area behind the seat an RAF interior green. It is jarring, wrong, and frankly looks pretty awful. I'm sure at the time it was a panicky, time-related decision, but if I had the opportunity, I would redo it either in XF5 as the instructions call for, or simply in the same mix used in the cockpit. All things told, it's a solid kit without many competitors and at a reasonable price. If you want a 48 scale Buffalo, give one of Tamiya's boxings a try and you'll likely be pleased with your end product.